Hey, Dan here. I just wanted to give a sour beer update. Wanted to talk about some of the techniques I've been using on my sour Solera project. First, I wanted to go over, I guess, a couple of philosophy slash circumstance kind of things that have geared me towards or steered me towards using these kinds of techniques. The first thing is I don't have a lot of room. I don't have a lot of space. If I had it my way, I'd have a whole room dedicated to just fermenters and storing them. Unfortunately, I don't have that, so that's one reason why I've been using 1-gallon batches and things like that, and also using the Solera method. And another thing is that I think that the older a sour beer is, the better it tastes. So when you've got about 2 to 3 years on a sour beer, that's when it really starts to taste good. Before that, the sour beers are just young and a little bit one-dimensional. So that's why I've been using the Solera method, is because you can kind of keep that aged sour beer around a little bit longer. Again, it's the sour or the Solera method is where you pull a couple of gallons out of a 6-gallon fermenter, or say 10 gallons out of a 50-gallon barrel, and package that up somehow, and then refill it with 10 gallons of wort, or in my case 2 gallons of wort, or freshly fermented beer. So you kind of keep the Solera going. You do that every 6 months or every year. So you kind of keep the aged sour flavors continuously going. So with that, let me show you some of the techniques I've been playing around with. So I chose to do some loquats on my sour beer. Loquat is kind of similar to an apricot, lighter in flavor, a little bit sweeter. You see loquats grow on trees. I had access to this tree, locally grown wild loquats. I pitted the loquats. The pits take up most of the fruit, and I collected about 3 pounds, cut them in half, so that's 3 pounds without the seeds in them. And then I froze the loquats for a couple of months before I used them. As a side note, I did collect a couple loquats and put it in some wort. Dropped the wort pH down to under 4.5, but unfortunately all I got was this mold and no change in gravity after 7 days. So unfortunately I had to toss this out. That was my attempt at catching some wild yeast. I'll try again with a different fruit probably. So after a couple of months of storing the loquats, I went ahead and put them in a 1-gallon fermenter, all 3 pounds. Went into this 1-gallon fermenter, which I'll then fill up with my sour Solera beer. I then racked 1 gallon of the sour beer on top of those loquats. Having 1 gallon free, I'm putting in another oak spiral in here. I'm going to probably, well, I did end up bottling a couple of bottles of this sour beer about a month later, so just putting in some fresh oak to liven up that oak flavor. On my third 1-gallon batch, about 2.5 years ago, this beer had a lot of nail polish in the nose, but I found through blending it, I was able to blend down the ethyl acetate, which has a really high taste threshold. At lower levels, it comes off as like a fruity pineapple flavor. It's actually really good. So I went ahead and racked this 1-gallon batch that I had going into my main sour Solera. And I did test it beforehand. I tested the blend, and it tasted really good. So I went ahead and was able to salvage this 1-gallon batch of 2.5-year-old sour beer. After racking the 1 gallon in, I went ahead and took a sample of this beer just to do some blending with a fresh beer, which is going to result in the next pull from the sour Solera. So here I'm using a bicycle CO2 filler to purge the top of my fermenter headspace. I've read about this on Homebrew Talk, but I think when you purge from the top, mostly the gases are just mixing. You can read more about that on wineandjournal.com. Just search for CO2 blanket. It's a bit of a myth there, actually. The gases just end up mixing more than anything, so I probably won't be using this method in the future. Same idea goes for purging your kegs. After about a week, I got a slow fermentation on the Loquat beer. I didn't add any additional organisms. This is just my house sour yeast cake. After a week, I went ahead and pulled 2 more gallons out of my sour Solera to bottle up, blending it with another gallon. I used 3.9 ounces of priming sugar. First, I racked a gallon of a fresh saison that I brewed with the Yeast Bay Wallonian yeast, which was a really nice saison yeast. The beer came out really nice, very lot of light fruit esters in it. Exactly what I was looking for. It blended well with my sour beer when I sampled. So, racking a gallon of that into my bottling bucket, and racked 2 gallons of my sour beer into the bottling bucket, along with the priming sugar. For bottling, I'm using 375 milliliter Belgian bottles. They take normal caps, but you have to flip the little metal plates on the Red Baron wing capper, or you can use a bench capper. But these Belgian bottles worked really well, and they hold a much higher carbonation level than normal bottles. I was really pleased with how these bottles worked out. So you can see I'm kind of using a blending process in small batches to try to both increase my volume and increase the quality of the beer at the same time. Really, the sour beer by itself was too thin at this point and very sour, and so I wanted something more rounded, and the saison yeast gave it that nice balanced profile that I was looking for. So I did bottle about 25 bottles of it. Gonna give it another taste, a tasting test taste in a couple of weeks, so look out for another video on that. In the meantime, cheers guys.